You don't remember when you first saw her eyes not clearly, only that they reminded you of something lost, something unfinished, like a letter you wrote and never sent, or a funeral where no one cried. She doesn't haunt you because she's gone. She haunts you because she stayed too long in a room you thought was locked. You held her hand like a prayer you didn't believe in, just enough faith to feel holy, just enough doubt to keep it burning. The moment you pulled away, she fell in. The less you gave, the more she carved you out of her ribs like a second Eden. Every silence you offered became her cathedral. Every delay became her doctrine. She is not attracted to you. She is seduced by your absence. That is the only form of intimacy she knows how to love. You didn't make her feel chosen. You made her feel unsure, and in that uncertainty, she bloomed into obsession. Not because you're worthy, but because doubt is the only flame that won't extinguish when the heart goes cold. If this whisper already knows, you let it echo. Like the video. Leave your shadow in the comments. Subscribe. And stay near the silence. She does not want your love, she wants your hesitation, because it mirrors her own. You gave her nothing, and she clung to it like a hymn. Not the soft nothing of apathy, but the sharpened absence that feels intentional. You didn't reject her. Not quite. You simply left your hands half open, as if waiting for something heavier than her to fill them. And in that space, unspoken, unfinished, she saw a version of herself worth chasing, not because you loved her, but because you didn't confirm that you didn't. You don't remember the words you didn't say, but she does. She remembers them like scars she gave herself. When you paused before replying, when your eyes drifted past hers mid-conversation, when you touched her like she might disappear, those were her revelations. She stitched your hesitation into a tapestry of meaning. Because doubt, to her, feels like home, not safety, but familiarity. She was raised on withheld affection, fed on the ambiguity of affection promised but not proven. It wasn't your smile she returned to at night, it was the questions she saw behind it. Would he? Did he? Was that glance meant for me? She doesn't fall for men who give. She falls for men who hover like a cliff's edge, close, high, and always almost. You were the edge she could throw herself off without ever touching the ground. When you looked at her and said nothing, she fell harder than when someone else said I love you. Certainty flattens her desire. Clarity kills the ache she mistakes for connection. But you let the ache live. You left enough unsaid to turn every silence into a mirror, and she looked into it until her own reflection blinked back. Not yours. Hers. You didn't become her addiction. Her need for ambiguity did. She speaks of freedom, but crawls into cages made of delay. She says she wants honesty, but only when it arrives in riddles. The truth, when offered plainly, turns her stomach. But the hollow space of your hand, the almost, the maybe, the absence of guarantee seduces her. You don't hold her, you suggest that you might. And that suggestion is worth more than any touch could ever be. Because deep down, she doesn't believe love stays. She doesn't trust permanence. So the only love she respects is the one she has to earn again and again. The love that recedes every time she reaches. And you became the perfect ghost to worship, present enough to haunt, distant enough to remain pure. She thinks she wants you. She wants her own longing reflected in someone else's refusal. She once told a friend you were mysterious. What she meant was, he won't make me real. And that's safer, because to be fully seen would be unbearable. To be chosen without conditions would make her confront how little she believes she deserves. But your doubt, your retreat, that she understands, that she can dance with. You only touched her knee once, but she replayed it for days, Not because it was tender, but because you did not follow it up. You didn't text her after. You didn't name it. You let the gesture drift, orphaned, and that ambiguity gave her something to build. She wants to construct, not receive, because to receive means trusting the thing won't collapse. But construction, that's where she's God. She studied every emoji you didn't send, every double space between your texts, every time you read her message and waited, not because she's obsessive, but because she's searching for the edge, your edge, where she can press herself against uncertainty and call it romance. She doesn't want you to fall for her. She wants you to almost, because almost is infinite. And what of you? You didn't plan this. You didn't strategize detachment. But some part of you, perhaps the part that still fears intimacy like a burning room, sensed her hunger and responded with famine. Not cruelty, just a subtle withdrawal, a slowness of warmth. And she read it as a secret. She thinks you're hiding depth. You're not. You're hiding escape routes. You fear being needed too much. She fears being known too little. You fear becoming the answer. She fears never being the question. And in that mutual distortion, you find rhythm. You pretend to be undecided. She pretends that means you care. You retreat. She spirals. You surface. She breathes. Neither of you is in love. You are both in a pattern. She doesn't crave affection. She craves permission to chase. You gave her that. Every time you paused, every time you glanced away mid-laugh, every time your attention was one thread too loose to feel tied. That looseness became the rope she knotted around herself. She calls it chemistry. It's just unhealed memory finding new shapes. You wonder if she's sincere. She is. She would weep for you. She would pray for you, but not because of who you are, only because of what you won't give. Her love grows in absence. In your cold hand, she plants roses. They cut her, and she calls it passion. You offered her nothing, and she turned it into poetry. That isn't love. It's devotion to a symbol. And you were lucky enough to resemble one. You could have told her I like you, but you didn't. And she felt more alive than if you had. Because in the waiting, she feels worthy. In the ambiguity, she imagines choice. She doesn't want the truth. She wants the potential for truth. She wants to believe that if you had to choose, it would be her. But as long as you don't choose, she never has to know. And here's the wound: she doesn't trust real affection. Real affection exposes her, makes her flesh instead of myth. But your reluctance, your hollow hand, it allows her to stay a dream. She isn't attracted to you. She's addicted to the version of herself that still believes she might be enough to change your mind. So you hold her, not with arms, with distance, with just enough silence to keep her narrating your every pause. You hold her like a cathedral holds a scream, spacious, reverent, empty. And every time she doubts your interest, her desire triples, not for you, but for the illusion that this time, the void might echo her name back. Every time you withdraw, you recreate her father's silence, but this time she gets to chase it. You cancel the date. She says, "No problem," but inside, a theater curtain rises. The spotlight is not on you. It's on the empty chair. She doesn't feel abandoned. She feels awakened. The delay doesn't disappoint her, it gives her something sacred to pursue. She walks home with her phone like a relic pressed to her chest, whispering, "He had a reason. He must. This isn't rejection. This is a test." And she was born to pass tests written in disappearing ink. You don't answer her question. She doesn't forget. She just turns it into prophecy. Your delay is not silence. It's a script she believes she's finally ready to decode. You didn't reply because you didn't know what to say. She turns that into strategy. Maybe you're protecting her from too much emotion. Maybe you're scared, too. Maybe this is what men do when they're on the edge of real feeling. She learned this catechism long before you ever met. When you disappear for 3 days, you think the connection might be fading. She thinks you're reeling with doubt and depth and desire too big for text. You imagine she'll move on. She imagines you're trembling. You stay silent. She calls it intimacy, because silence was the first language she learned from the man who gave her life but never looked her in the eye. You're not responsible for what her father did, but you are now the echo in the room where he never stood. And she walks through that cathedral daily. When you delay, you don't just make her wait. You resurrect something older than either of you, a wound without a voice, a dinner table where she spoke into a void, a birthday when he promised to come and sent no call, no card, only the invisible cloak of doubt. She doesn't love your attention, she worships the wait, not because she's patient, but because she was trained to believe that distance means devotion measured in pain, that the more she suffers to be seen, the more valuable her image must be. And so when you vanish, she doesn't ask, "Where did he go?" She whispers, "What will I become to bring him back?" You imagine she's too strong for this. She posts quotes about boundaries. She smiles in group photos, but under every smile is a ledger. Every delay is recorded. Every unanswered message becomes a seed, not of resentment, but of meaning. This is how I will prove I'm worth the return. You didn't ask her to wait. She appointed herself the guardian of your silence. And if, one day, you send a single sentence at midnight, "Sorry, busy week," she exhales like a pilgrim reaching the temple doors. The content of the message doesn't matter. It could say, "Hey," or "Sorry, I vanished." She reads it like scripture. The delay sanctifies it. The longer the absence, the more sacred the return. The more hollow the message, the more room for interpretation. She fills the gaps with reverence. You see a gap in communication. She sees a corridor of mystery. She walks it barefoot, lighting candles at every turn. Not because you are holy, but because your withholding allows her to reenact the original myth of love. She was taught that love is earned through waiting, through ache, through unanswered prayers. Her theology of desire requires an absent God. You, my friend, became divine the moment you withdrew. You say, "I don't want to lead her on," but every delay is a breadcrumb, and she is starving for ambiguity. The ones who love her too soon get discarded, not because they are wrong, but because they destroy the ritual, the sacred delay, the myth of pursuit. You gave her back the hunger she mistakes for affection, and that hunger is familiar. It tastes like family. You've become her pilgrimage. Every time she waits, she builds a shrine in her mind. You're not just a man. You're the mystery that promises closure without delivering it. And that's exactly what keeps her near. If you told her plainly how you feel good or bad, it would collapse the temple. Clarity is her ruin. She doesn't want to know the ending. She wants to earn the answer. She learned early that some fathers stay and never listen, while others vanish and become myths. She prefers the myth. At least with myths, she can still hope. At least with you, she can still imagine this is about fate, not fear. She can tell herself your delay is the mark of a man in conflict, a soul too complex for surface affection. You didn't create this fantasy, you simply didn't interrupt it. You think you're being cautious, but the sacred delay is a ceremony to her. Every second you stay silent, she decorates the altar. She waits not because she's weak, but because waiting gives her power. In delay, she's the chosen one in limbo. In delay, She's the protagonist of a love story still being written. Once it's finished, she vanishes. But as long as it's incomplete, she's the heroine. She doesn't ask, "Why is he distant?" She asks, "How can I become the woman he chooses?" It's a rigged game, but it's the only one she was taught to win. And you perhaps unwittingly keep dealing the cards. You do not chase her, you do not end it, you hover. And in that hovering, she hears music. Not because it's there, but because she must believe it is. You text her once, late at night, when you're not even thinking clearly, thinking of you. She doesn't sleep for hours, not because of the words, but because you waited days to say them. The delay turned your throwaway line into poetry, into prophecy, into proof. She doesn't love the message. She loves that she earned it. Through patience, through ache, through silence. The delay makes you look deep, even when you're unsure. The pause makes you seem careful, even when you're indifferent. The time you take creates the illusion of wait, but there is no wait, only delay. Only the hollow echo of a girl who once waited for her father to knock and found a lover who never does. You didn't break her, but you became the stage on which she reenacts every holy absence. You are the silence that lets her build meaning without interruption. And the more you delay, the more she believes. Not in you, but in the version of herself who is worthy of a man too overwhelmed to reply. That's the story she tells. That's the gospel she recites. So you say nothing, and her attraction triples. Not because you've grown more beautiful, more honest, more human, but because your delay gives her what life never did, a role in the drama of being worthy. And she will wait, and she will ache, and she will believe it's sacred. Because waiting is all she's ever been taught to do with love. She does not see you. She sees herself, waiting to be chosen by someone who never will. You imagine she's falling in love with you. But what you don't see, what she doesn't even see, is that your face has become her mirror. Not a reflection of who you are, but a screen onto which she casts the film of her own becoming. She does not look at you to know you. She looks at you to find herself reflected in someone who withholds, someone who lingers, someone who forgets to choose. You are not the man she desires. You are the delay she needs to reanimate the wound. In every pause, every unread message, every distracted glance, she sees the ancient pattern unfold again. I am not seen. Therefore I must become visible. It is not your soul she's trying to reach. It's her own, scattered through years of silent rooms and empty birthdays. You happen to be standing where her father never stood. And now, your eyes are her judgment, your silence her sentence, your unpredictability her altar. When you speak, she listens for signs, not meaning. A laugh becomes a prophecy, a sigh becomes a warning. She scans your words like scripture translated badly, always half erased, always needing interpretation. You don't understand why she keeps asking what you meant, why she texts again even after you've drifted. But it's not you she's asking, it's the absence. The same absence she's known since childhood, now given a face, a scent, a voice. She does not want to know your thoughts. She wants your silence to finally speak. She does not need your love. She needs your gaze to break the spell of invisibility cast on her long before you met. But that gaze never comes, because you are not really there. You are uncertain and soft and vague, and that makes you perfect. Because someone fully present would disrupt the dream. She imagines you're distant because you're complicated, that you care but cannot say it, that you're full of storms she might calm. She doesn't know that behind your silence is not depth, but retreat, not mystery, but hesitation. You are not a locked door. You are a hallway with no end. And she keeps walking, hoping the echo will eventually sound like her name. The more she wonders what you're thinking, the more she feels connected. She does not realize she's alone in the conversation, that she's talking to her younger self in your mouth, that the questions she asks you, "Do you miss me? Were you ever afraid?" are not yours to answer. They are the ghosts of men who left her waiting on staircases, in schoolyards, behind cracked doors. She doesn't know what you smell like when you're joyful. She doesn't know how your face folds in sleep. But she's sure she loves you. Not because of who you are, but because of who you allow her to become in your absence, someone worthy of the chase, someone still fighting to be chosen. She decorates you with traits you never claimed. She assigns you virtues born from her ache. You once paused before speaking and she decided you were soulful. You once forgot her birthday and she said you were deeply conflicted. She made you complex because complexity justifies neglect. Simplicity would demand an answer. Complexity lets her stay in the question. You are her mirror, but you do not reflect. You absorb. And the more you absorb, the more she pours. Her dreams, her father's departure, the boy who kissed her then ghosted her, the man who promised and turned cold. She pours them all into you and calls the container love, but it is not love, it is echo. You are not real to her, you are a role, and she is playing her part perfectly. The girl who believes she is almost enough, the woman who believes one more gesture, one more text, one more night of waiting will unlock the floodgates. You don't see the script, but she reads it every day, in your delays, in your half attention, in your accidental cruelty. You didn't mean to become a ghost, but you drifted just far enough for her to call the haunting holy. You didn't lie, you just didn't clarify, and that is worse, because truth wounds. But ambiguity preserves hope, and hope is her favorite addiction. When she dreams of you, it's always you turning toward her, never speaking, never reaching, just turning halfway. The moment before contact stretched into eternity, she wakes not with joy, but with the ache that says I'm close. It's not satisfaction, it's anticipation, and anticipation is safer than intimacy. She doesn't want to know your flaws. She wants to believe that your silence hides tenderness, that your delay hides devotion, that your distance is evidence of fear, not indifference. She doesn't want you to say I love you. She wants to imagine what it would feel like if you almost did, because in almost, she never has to grieve. In almost, she never has to lose. You could tell her now clearly, fully, that you are unsure, uninterested, unavailable, and she would thank you. But later, in the quiet, she would reconstruct your rejection into a poem. He pushed me away because he's afraid, because he's never been truly loved. You do not get to escape her mythology. Even your absence is part of the narrative. You are not cruel, but you are careless with your mystery, and in your hands, mystery becomes a blade. You didn't stab her, but you left the knife on the table, and she did the rest. Because she believes pain is the price of meaning. Because she learned to turn heartbreak into performance. Because when she cries, she feels visible. She texts you again, just a wave emoji, just a hook to see if you'll bite. You don't. She smiles to herself and says, he's thinking. And maybe you are, but not of her. Still, her fantasy grows, because every unanswered gesture is soil for her projections, and the garden of the unloved is always lush. She once believed love was eye contact. Now she believes it's pattern recognition. If you look at her long enough, just once, she will write 100 meanings into that glance. She doesn't see you. She sees the version of herself who was never picked, and she's using you to rewrite that memory. But you're not choosing, you're hesitating, and that makes the rewrite impossible, which makes it eternal, which makes it addictive. You are the unfinished sentence she's been waiting to end with a kiss, but you won't kiss her. And so she kisses the air, the space, the silence, and calls it love. You could walk away, you could block her, you could say, "This isn't real," but she would still find a way to believe, because the girl inside her has never been chosen, and you were just real enough to believe that might change. And so she waits, not for your love, for the part of herself she keeps hoping someone will reflect. But your mirror has no eyes. Somewhere, in a house she never left, a child presses her hands to a fogged-up window. She writes her name backward, hoping someone will read it from the other side. But the room behind the glass is empty, and the man she's waiting for is not you. He never was, and yet your shadow fits the shape. You could knock, you could vanish, you could scream that she's wrong, but the mirror remains, not shattered, not whole, just waiting. And if she stands there long enough, if she keeps her breath steady and her gaze soft, she'll see a flicker, a movement, a maybe, and that will be enough to believe, to wait, to fall again.